Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of On the Fly. My guest today is Gemma Stockdale, recently joining Homes England as Affordable Housing Strategy Manager. Gemma, how are you?
Hello, I'm good. How are you?
Good. I am not too bad, thank you very much. Gemma's come on today because she's had the unique experience of leaving one company and joining another in the crazy lockdown world that we found ourselves in the last few months. So I think probably best to start off with Gemma, because I think there's going to be a lot of people who are in this situation themselves who have sadly maybe lost a job or are looking for opportunities or virtual interviewing or, getting embedded in a company. So I guess the best thing to do is probably just start your journey of where you were and then how it's kind of progressed over the last few months and up until where you are now. So crack on.
All right. Nothing like throwing the goal wide open there, Skippy. Good lad.
Yeah.
Right. So I had thrown my hat in the ring for a job that I'd seen advertised on Twitter at Homes England back in kind of around beginning to the middle of February. Made my application, got a confirmation of an interview that I would be going to the Leeds office for at the kind of around the middle of March. All very exciting, very nerve-wracking. And then on the Friday before my interview, I got a call from the lady who is now my manager saying, "How do you feel about interviewing via Teams?" I thought, oh, okay, this is going to be interesting.
New scenario.
Absolutely. So no having to kind of jump on the train early doors to get to Leeds and find the office and, make sure I didn't get into trouble or lost on the way, as people quite often do. Not that that's casting any aspersions on Leeds, but you know what I mean. The kind of the interview process in terms of like the prep that you would usually go through personally kind of on that day, and I would have had an hour sat on the train reading my notes and kind of trying to mentally gear myself up to go into the room and meet people that you've never met before in unfamiliar surroundings, etc., turned into getting up at a regular time of the morning, having a cup of tea and some breakfast, reading through my notes and doing my interview sitting right here in my dining room. So it was peculiar, but in some ways I think I'm the sort of person that does get myself really wound up with things like this. I get awful nerves, and in some ways kind of the novelty of the situation and kind of how bizarre it was kind of nicely took the edge off it, actually. So in the end, it wasn't a bad thing at all for me. Kind of, as we all do, sitting in front of our cameras, very much business up top with my fluffy slippers on underneath the table, and feeling really quite comfortable at the time. It was good.
I suppose it's natural surroundings that can kind of comfort you, and then you just focusing on the interview and the questions and getting that process done. So absolutely.
One of the things that I've learned from other interviews that I've done, especially in circumstances where I've had to present, because like I say, my nerves hit absolute kind of critical peak in those sorts of circumstances. And a top tip that I learned from a former director of mine was essentially to try and own your space. So it's very difficult when you go into, somebody else's building, somebody else's workspace. They've got it set up for them to be able to interview. And sometimes you really have to kind of stop and look around and think, actually, where do I want to be in this room? Is there going to be a way that I can make myself more comfortable by maybe, moving a chair or shifting some stuff around just so that you feel a little bit more kind of comfortable in the space. And of course, in this kind of scenario, you are in your own personal space. So you have absolute complete control over everything that's around you. The only thing that you can't control is the questions that are coming through the screen. So in a lot of ways, I think that for me really worked well, and did leave me kind of feeling much more relaxed and again, like I say, kind of the novelty of the whole situation made it feel, in a strange way, much less formal than a face-to-face kind of suited and booted interview scenario would have been, I think, which, as you well know, I'm not naturally a very formal person, so I think that suited me down to the ground. Absolutely.
And then I guess as well, you mentioned, making that safe space. And I think I shared something on LinkedIn a while back about when you're interviewing with somebody, absolutely they're interviewing you as an individual to come work for them, but it works two ways through that camera, that you're interviewing them as a potential employee. There's got to building that rapport and feel that you could work with this person and the job's what it was, what you want it to be for you. But the process then, obviously you were successful, which was great to hear. How was that kind of transition period, I guess, of finishing up with the previous business, joining up with Homes England, getting inducted, embedded, obviously you can't go and meet a team or have a brew with them. And
I haven't met anyone that I work with in person, apart from the people that, a handful of people that I already knew that worked for the agency. So it's all kind of completely sort of remote relationship building at the moment, which is really quite peculiar. But yeah, kind of tracking back, so where I was before, so I used to work for 13 Group, and I'd spent the previous year working on developing an influencing strategy for the business that was kind of the first time that they'd taken such a kind of in-depth and very specific structured look about how influencing should work in that organization. So I'd had a year of kind of being very self-directed and working largely solo to some extent. And then at the beginning of this year, had gone back from that project into my day job, which is kind of more broad project management across the resources directorate. So because I was so early kind of being back into that role and still kind of setting things up, and of course with COVID kind of coming in like a wrecking ball, for want of a better term, it was kind of everyone came back after Christmas and it was sort of floating around and it was on the horizon and people were talking about it a little bit, but nobody really knew what it was going to be. And then suddenly it seemed like, you saw what happened in China and then in Italy, and it was quite clear that actually, what we might have been able to do now could be really different. So I think the point that I'm, in a very convoluted way, trying to make is that actually at the time of me getting my new role at Homes England, didn't really have that much on the books because of kind of that whole scenario of sort of starting back in that role, but not really being able to get, as far into things as probably I would have had COVID and lockdown issues kind of not come onto the horizon and then, and ended up coming onto us very, very quickly. So that meant that my notice period at 13 was actually really quick. It was only 3 weeks. Okay. So super quick transition, short handover with, the colleagues from my existing team at 13. And then suddenly it just seemed like it was there and it was upon us. It's like, right, well, Friday, kind of virtual team lunch over Teams when you could still only fit 4 people on a screen at once, which was a little bit weird, but still fun. And bless their hearts, I mean, I'd been at 13 11 years and in my existing team in various guises for probably 3.5 years. So, these people are like my family. I've known everyone for so long. And then to suddenly kind of just like close my laptop and know that, well, that's going to be it. You kind of don't get the month that you would usually have of your notice period to kind of see people in the office ad hoc and while you're making a cuppa and say, oh, by the way, you've got a new job. And you get to catch up and say your goodbyes in a sort of drawn out way through that period, and then you kind of get your big bang and your leaving do at the end and all the rest of it, and it's nicely kind of closed, and you do get that sense of closure of doing that.
It's wrapped up neatly, I guess, as well.
Absolutely.
As opposed to, like you say, just drip and drabs, because now that you've joined the Homes England, you're probably still saying effectively a few goodbyes to a few colleagues that you wouldn't have interacted with because they're not might not be on the projects or in your team. You would have seen just in the kitchen in passing. I think if anyone knows 13s,
Yeah.
all spread out, so you get a chance to kind of see everybody. So yeah.
Yeah. It's very peculiar, and it does feel very strange and kind of like really emotional that you kind of haven't been able to like draw that real line under things, and hug it out with your friends kind of thing. And I think it's one of those strange things that lockdowns taught me, especially now, kind of moving from that environment that I knew so well to then kind of being with all of those people but in a very remote way, and then to not having any of those people and needing to start kind of trying to find my new people, if you know what I mean, and really kind of realizing actually what a social place, a workplace is. So I think I can remember when I first kind of entered the employment world, people saying, "Oh, my work people and my work people, they're not my friends. They're people that I work with. They don't, socialize, don't associate with people outside of work, etc., etc." I think for me, like, not only was my workplace incredibly sociable, and the people that I worked with genuinely are my friends, and will continue to be friends. But equally, you kind of miss just that social interaction. The chit chat at the water machine and the kettle, and in the queue for the canteen at lunchtime, and all of that kind of passing conversation about life in general, as well as kind of more importantly when you start in a new job, is all of those things that you learn by osmosis, because you're sitting in a room with people that are doing different jobs, that are connected to the job that you now do, and all of that stuff that you learn that you kind of don't even realize that you learn, or just having somebody sat on the desk opposite, and you can say, "Oh, I need to talk to somebody about this. Who's the best person to go and bother?" And you kind of don't have that.
No.
So it's a really peculiar way to begin a new job. And I mean, the people at Homes England are such friendly folk. I've been made so welcome right from the get-go. And I started on the 4th of May, Star Wars Day.
Yep.
Very good. Good omen, I took that as I'm sure you will agree.
At least it wasn't the 5th, because that is May the 6th be with you. So yeah.
Exactly, that would be bad. But no, the force has definitely been with me, and I've felt grateful for that. But yeah, they've been cracking, and it's so much of what I've learned has just been through the course of conversation, as it would be normally. But I think the thing that you realise is that all of these conversations now, need to be booked in. They need to be planned. There's no kind of like just that ad hoc, snappy interaction. Everything's in the diary and feels bizarrely formal as a result of that.
Even though we're sitting in here in t-shirts and casual, but yeah, in terms of the diary just being this call, this call, this call, this call, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think everybody is kind of really feeling that sort of screen fatigue about knowing that you're looking at somebody face to face right now, and you need to look like you're paying attention. You can't kind of sit back, relax a bit, do a bit of slouching. It's like it feels kind of like you need to look like you're
engaged. Yeah,
exactly, and compass mentis and awake. Which for some people I think is probably getting quite difficult to feel that way after kind of so long doing this.
6 or 7 hours video call in one day, you come out at the end of it and you're just sitting there just like a zombie type of thing. It's
absolutely.
Just
and the strangest thing is kind of having those days that are from dawn till dusk, back to back, bang bang bang, and you just don't stop, don't get a rest, to the point where actually Homes England guidelines suggest making sure that you take what would usually be an hour meeting down to maybe 45 or 50 minutes, so that people have a chance to get up and go to the loo between calls, so you're actually not sat 4 hours straight, because nobody's going to be comfortable. And all those kind of things, and then suddenly have a day where you've got very little in the diary, and then you're sat in your 4 walls of space with absolutely zero interaction. And I think for me, I've found that juxtaposition kind of quite jarring, And if I get a couple of days on the hop where I don't have very much in my diary, then suddenly I'm starting to feel a little bit like, stir crazy in my own little bubble. It's finding the balance is a really tough thing, but everybody's working so hard to do it.
Yeah.
And I think for me personally, so the team that I've gone into is a brand new team at Homes England. The entire organisation's just been through a huge restructure. So lots of people going through massive change, starting new roles, going into new teams within lockdown, which is still, a huge challenge, even if you've been in the organisation a long time. But for me, my whole team is dispersed. So there's 7 of us in the team, and there's only two team members that will actually probably be in the office at the same time. The rest of us are kind of, dotted around, northeast Yorkshire, northwest Devon, where we're all over the shop. So for me, this is kind of going to be business as usual. This will just be what team life will be normally, because our opportunities to all be in the same room together will be quite rare. But what we've made sure to do is kind of take some time out to look at our ways of working, as we can't all be together, and the things that you can learn about people, I think, when you can see them and chat to them, and and it's more of a natural kind of communication, rather than this kind of sitting in front of a screen and looking at a box and that kind of thing. But we've been really careful to sort of take some time to think about that stuff, and share some things and think about how we're going to work as a team and the things that will help us to do that. And I think when you are in a dispersed team, as CIH Futures has always been as well, covering kind of all 4 nations and, multiple corners of the Isles, it's always been very much the same for us as well. And we've always found that where the real magic happens is when we're all in the room together.
I agree, and I think there is a kind of a balance at the moment that people have to find of being able to cope with this virtual way of working, but also being able to kind of kickstart that spark that you do get through human interaction. I think some of the best ideas in history that have been discussed over a beer between 2 friends or 2 colleagues, and that's the way it goes.
Absolutely.
But on the final point then, I guess, what advice would you give for somebody who is kind of in that process of going through interviews or joining a new business? It's just sum up kind of any tips or pointers you may be able to give them that obviously we discussed on areas about, making yourself feel comfortable in space, but is there anything, else or that you think would be useful for people out there?
I think one thing to bear in mind is that at the moment, obviously, this is the first time that a lot of organisations will ever have had to recruit under these circumstances. So don't expect it to be business as usual, or feel how it would usually feel, or maybe get contact within the period of time that you would usually expect to get contact from people, because all of those things are now kind of, the parameters are changed. And it's, I guess we just need to kind of be flexible as much as possible, even though, when you are offered a new role and it's so exciting and you just want your checks through and you want to know this and you want to know that and you want to know a million different things, sometimes that information comes through really quickly, sometimes it doesn't. But in terms of kind of, induction processes, etc., most organisations, unless you are not the kind of business that works in an office space, and like there must be loads of kind of global multinationals that this is just normal, Skype interviewing, remote working, people never actually meeting each other in person is probably absolutely business as usual for them. For a lot of organizations it's not. You think about what it was like when you went into a new job for the last time, or even a new team within the same business. You job shadow a lot, you spend time with people, you see what they do, you watch what they do, you kind of, they might be teaching you or coaching you in how to do a specific thing that's going to help you do your job. And doing those kind of things remotely is incredibly difficult. And I think, people teams and learning and development folk, line managers, are all working really, really hard to try and create a new experience that is, you know, appropriate in the current environment, but also, you know, still feels welcoming and, you know, valuable and gives you that space to learn. For me, my first couple of weeks at Homes England, until the rest of my team got here, because I was the first one in officially, the rest of the team came in on the 1st of June. Most of my induction was really self-directed, because what I didn't realise at the time was that actually our directorate was creating an induction experience, but it just wasn't quite ready yet.
No,
So
unprecedented. It's all brand new. You know,
absolutely,
trial and error, ironing out the kinks, of course.
yeah. So I think kind of be prepared to, you know, go out and find the information. If you want to know something, find somebody to ask. You know, booking those calls and those chats with people. If your organisation has big directorate meetings like mine does, where all sorts of, you know, really useful, really interesting information is shared. If somebody pops up with a short presentation in one of those meetings, if the chat's going down the side of the Teams call and somebody says something interesting, makes a comment that kind of particularly resonates with you, get in touch. There's never been a time when being proactive is more important. And in the absence of kind of, you know, slick, well-honed induction processes, being proactive is, you know, literally the number one tool in your box to make sure that you get the most out of that early stage of kind of entering a new place of work, and, you know, finding your people, making some friends, growing your network, which, you know, internally now is more important than ever, I think. So yeah, I think those are probably my top tips.
Okay, good. Well, I think we've covered everything, I would hope.
Cool.
I would say thank you very much for joining us, because, no, also joining me. Is that the way you say it? I don't know, I'm getting words confused.
I
It's
think
Thursday, and it's very warm, so
you.
yeah. But no, like I say, thank you very much for coming on and being a guest and talking us through your interesting last couple of months, shall we say, of you know, jumping in and out and ducking and diving and wheeling and dealing, as it were. But I'll say that when we're out of lockdown, I'll pop up and have a beer, and yeah, we'll go from there.
You're buying, kiddo.
All good. Take care. See ya.